Hi, F Block. Um, all right, so you guys have watched a video and done a packet on the Industrial Revolution, so you already know some of this stuff, but we are going to delve headfirst into some of this Industrial Revolution stuff that is pretty interesting. Okay, so as you already know, it started in England, and before the Industrial Revolution, have to discuss, we have to discuss how people got their food because there is no industrial revolution unless there's an agricultural revolution that allows people to get food easily and not spend their whole day on the farm. Okay? So, before the industrial revolution, before the agricultural revolution, there was what was known as subsistence farming. Okay, subsistence farming. And that just means farming to live. Um, you would leave one field fallow, which would mean just like you wouldn't grow something on that field, and animal would graze on common land. So there would be these common land areas where people could just bring their sheep or whatever, their cows to graze. And it was kind of like communal, kind of like just everyone kind of working together, except for you would, plant your own fields, but you would share where you would bring your livestock to eat. All right, so there are disadvantages. It's inefficient. There's no reason or no um, move towards innovation in this system. Um, and population's growing, and there's scarcity of food, so they need to have food. Under the continental system, there was a blockade, so they weren't really getting as much food from America and from other areas, so they needed to become self sufficient. So the first thing that Parliament does in England is start what's known as the enclosure movement, which landlords fenced in what was known as common land, common pastures, and they decided to try a new farming technique known as crop rotation. Fields were not left fallow, but rather they planted new crops that could be effective to feeding livestock in the winter. Okay, so turnips, clovers, alfalfa, you could store that in your barn and feed your livestock. So you wouldn't have to slaughter all your most of your cattle before the winter, and you could keep them and feed them through the winter. Other discoveries were Jethro Tull invented the seed drill, which reduces the number of seeds you needed because you could drill down into the ground and plant things in nice, neat rows. Um, and corn and potatoes were brought from the New World. They were easy to grow and cheap and full of calories. So you could feed poor people with corn and potatoes, and they would have enough caloric intake to live and keep working hard. So this was all good. All right, so the enclosures, um, if you look at this map, you can see that where the enclosures were happening. It's pretty much down the center of England, um, and it allows soil to rest. So your fields would kind of look like that: turnips and barley, wheat, and clover. So they had two fields with stuff for the livestock, and then you'd have your barley and wheat, which would be, crops that you could sell to humans to eat. Of course, you can eat turnips as an, you can eat clover also as a human, but they were safe for animals. All right, so the seed drill, we already talked about that. Jethro Tull. Crop rotation was Lord Townsend. Uh, Turnips, clovers, oats, and barley were the key um, crops of crop rotation. Animal husbandry, which was Robert Blackwell, basically they decided to breed animals um, by size. And so you would kind of, let's say you were a cattle farmer, you would get a bull that's nice, big, and strong, and you would have him inseminate all your cows. And the reason behind it would be that you would get bigger cows, and you'd maybe try to pair up big cows with big cows to make even bigger cows. The plow was invented. All right. Also, before factories, how did people make stuff that they needed, especially clothing? there was what was known as cottage industry. Okay, cottage industry um, was making clothes or other products at home. It was multi generational. Your grandma and your mom and you would all be working in simple machines, spinning thread and then weaving it into cloth. You would produce less. And in this cottage industry, oftentimes to make money, like one family would be like the thread spinning family, and they would just spin thread, spin thread, spin thread, and then they would sell their thread to another family who would weave and make it into cloth, and then another family would maybe make it into clothing. So here's a family spinning and weaving at home. Um, Other innovations, there were rivers and canals that would help transportation. These canals also, you saw them in the video, would help power mills. They were a good water source, help for bringing your products to market. So here's how the canal system would work. Essentially, you would go into, if you looking at this picture and you see the little barn doors, you would go into an area. It would the water would rise up higher, so you could go over a hill. Then the doors would open to the next one. You'd sail in, and then it would rise up the water again. Um, the big innovation was mining, and in that video you guys watched, there was a lot of information about how coal was super plentiful in England, and that is why they were able to mine so much of it. And it becomes the real engine of the Industrial Revolution. Okay, so if you look at the coal mining, and don't need to spend a lot of time on this, but if you look at it from 1800 to 1914, it just grows exponentially. It's just out of control how quickly it grows. Children were used as coal miners because they were small and they could fit in the shafts. They were also used as chimney sweeps. A lot of times, people wouldn't be able to take care of their kids, and they would be orphaned, not because their parents died, but just left, abandoned. And a lot of these orphanages were overrun. So, like, if you were a chimney sweep, sad to say, but chimney sweeps would go and quote unquote adopt children to clean their chimneys for them because they could fit down the chimneys. And a lot of them would. Obviously, these are small children. They would slip, fall, injure themselves, die. Um, and they were used as factory workers, poor children. And so they really had these horrible, horrible upbringing and lives, and it really shortened their lives. I mean, if you're a coal miner from the age of, 5 or 6, by the time you're 24, 25, you've got black lung and you're close to death. So it was not a great life if you were not wealthy in England in this time period. Textiles. I'm sad to say that when I was your age, I thought textiles were actually like bathroom tiles. They are not. They are clothing. They are cloth. The biggest industry of the Victorian age was textiles, clothing. Okay, when you think of factories back then, they were clothing factories. Okay, cottage industry ends. People turn to factory life because it makes clothing a whole lot cheaper. Okay, there were new inventions that like power looms and the steam engine all factored in. There was this new power, coal, that would power the steam engine, so you could put a factory literally anywhere. You did not have to be near a water source. Um, Factory towns would be built up. A lot of people would move to these towns, and the factory owner would own all the apartments, and they would own all facets of life. So basically, factory workers were kind of close to slaves. I mean, I guess they could leave the factory town, and it's not as bad as slavery, but they did not have a lot of agency for sure. And there was new labor because less people needed to work on farms because they were more efficient. All right, so what was life like in a factory? Long, monotonous days. They were dangerous. The lighting was very poor. Envision if you're home, close the shades to your bedroom or wherever you're listening to this and turn out the lights. That's about the lighting. And there was loud machinery and it was super boring. And therefore, a lot of people, um, because of all these distractions and whatnot, would lose limbs and stuff like that. Um, there were new inventions that were often destroyed by people called Luddites, who were anti-innovation. So the new inventions, the spinning jenny would make a quicker, easier way to make string. It was made by Samuel Compton. The water frame um, also made for string. And then Edmund Cartwright invented the power loom, which would use steam to weave cloth. Okay, so here's a picture of Luddites attacking frames or power looms, and they basically got their name from this mythical Robin Hood type character named Ned Ludd. He's a mythical figure who's supposed to live in Sherwood Forest. Okay, so why was it in England? Okay, the enclosure system created better farming. There was it was an island. Okay, so therefore they needed to become self-sufficient. There was tons of coal for mining. There were rivers and canals. Basically Parliament was supportive, and they built canals. There were already rivers, but they built canals. There were colonies to sell all this stuff to, and there was money. There was lots of money for people who wanted to invest, and they had lots of resources because they had colonies in India um, and in the Americas. They had things like cotton and other stuff that they could grow. All right, so here is a crash
Hi, I'm
course
John Green. This is
that I'm
Crash
going
Course
to
World History.
Pause. You're not going to watch it here. I'm going to put a link. You're going to watch this crash course, and then come back for part 2 of the notes, which is going to be a lot shorter. All right. That's the